Hey everyone. In this video, we're going to be talking about carbohydrates. We're going to talk about what they are, how they're formed, and how to identify them based on their functional group and the number of carbons. And by the end of this video, you should be able to classify a sugar as an aldose or ketose and indicate the number of carbon atoms in the sugar. So let's talk about carbs. So carbohydrates are one of the major sources of energy in our diets. They are a really common type of biological molecule. They're made from the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And they're also known as saccharides, which means sugars. So carbohydrates, carbs, saccharides, sugars are all names for the same thing. And the name carbohydrate comes from the fact that the molecular formula is some number of carbons and some number of H2O equivalents. So that could be C3, H2O3, or it could be C6, H2O6. So however many carbons there are, there's an equivalent number of waters. Not that that has anything to do with the structure. It's just a coincidence of the molecular formula. And that's where the name comes from. So how are carbohydrates formed? Well, carbohydrates are formed from photosynthesis. And this is the process by which plants or certain bacteria take carbon dioxide and water and energy from the sun, and they combine those carbon dioxide molecules with water to form glucose and oxygen. Now, the opposite of photosynthesis is respiration, and that's when animals digest carbohydrates and turn them back into carbon dioxide and water and energy. So producers, like plants and bacteria, produce sugars, and consumers, like us, eat sugar and turn it back into carbon dioxide and water. So photosynthesis and respiration. Now, you can classify carbohydrates based on how many individual sugar molecules there are. So a monosaccharide is just one sugar molecule. A disaccharide is two sugar molecules, and a polysaccharide has three or more sugar molecules. And so you can hydrolyze disaccharides and polysaccharides to release individual monosaccharides. We'll talk about these reactions in another video. So mono, di, or polysaccharides. Now let's talk about the functional groups in carbohydrates. So monosaccharides have a parent chain between 3 and 8 carbons long. They also contain a carbonyl functional group, either an aldehyde or a ketone. Sugars that contain an aldehyde group are known as aldoses. They have the aldehyde group, and they're known as ketoses if they have a ketone group. And every other carbon in the molecule has an alcohol on it. So sugars have 3 to 8 carbons. They have either an aldehyde or a ketone, and every other carbon has an alcohol group. Now, we can name sugars based on the number of carbons. Sugars usually have the ending OSE. And so if they have 3 carbons, we would call it a triose. 4 carbons, we call it a tetrose. 5 carbons is a pentose. 6 carbons is a hexose, so on and so forth. And so you can combine the prefix aldose or ketose with the number of carbons. So you can have an aldopentose, which would be a 5-carbon sugar with an aldehyde group. Or let's say you have a ketohexose, which would be a 6-carbon sugar with a ketone group. So can we identify each of these sugars based on the functional group and the number of carbons? So let's look at the first one here. We see the functional group here highlighted in pink is an aldehyde. And if we look at the number of carbons, there are 3 carbons. So this would be an aldo for aldehyde, triose. Ald for aldehyde, tri for 3 carbons, and ose because it's a sugar. So it's an aldo triose. All right, what about the second one here? It also has an aldehyde, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons. So this would be an aldo tetrose. Tetro for 4 carbons. And the next one here looks like it also has an aldehyde, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbons. So this would be an aldo pentose. Pent because it has 5 carbons. Now the last one here looks like it has a ketone functional group, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons. So we would call this a keto hexose. Keto because it's a ketone. Whoops. Gosh. So keto for ketone and 6 carbons, so hex, and then ose because it's a sugar. So identifying the sugars based on the functional group and the number of carbons. So that's it for this short video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.